More boots on the ground will allow us to attend.
Boots on the ground to police us, the citizens of Ontario.
It's a wonderful day in the homiehood, a wonderful day for a homie. Won't you be my homie to Taro?
You might think to yourself, why? Why would police need a post-secondary education? Why would they need to go to college or university? Why would they need a 2-year degree even, or a 3 or 4-year degree? And that is a great question. But if you take a moment and think about our other public sector workers, our teachers who need at least 6 years of post-secondary education, or our nurses who need at least 4 years of post-secondary education, those jobs tend not to even pay as much as a police officer. A lot of police officers make over $100,000. Now, you probably know somebody who's a nurse or a teacher, and you probably know that they're not pulling in that kind of money. Not only that, but Doug Ford legislated that nurses should get their wages frozen during the pandemic, the most stressful time in the history of our generation. Their wages were frozen, and that was found to be illegal and is now being taken, I believe, all the way to the Supreme Court because Doug Ford and the Conservatives are absolute ghouls. Not only that, but when teachers, people who work in education were collectively bargaining for their wages, for their rights, Doug Ford legislated back to work legislation and essentially stopped them from collectively bargaining. And it just goes to show that he absolutely hates the idea of quality public education. He hates the idea of quality public healthcare. But the one thing that he does love is the police. And it's really concerning to me that we live in a world that does not value our health or our intelligence, but what we do value is our ability to be policed. And it's kind of like frustrating in that sense, you know, like as he is saying here on Dofo's Twitter account, as crime continues to rise in communities across Ontario, we're taking action to get more boots on the ground. And first of all, the narrative that is being carved out here by Doug Ford and Conservatives is that crime is on the rise. There is no stats to actually back this up. All right, the only increase that I've seen is reporting on crime in the media. And we should all ask questions about that. Why is there this increase of reporting crime in the media? And maybe it is related to the fact that when these things happen, police tend to get more funding. Rip Soup is here saying, are police just municipal army factions now? Basically, yeah. Let's just draft them to the police force straight out of high school. Yeah, 3 months of education that is already paid for. And now, don't get me wrong. I believe in free education for all. It legitimately would not bother me if police had their education paid for, if we were all having our education paid for. But prioritizing police officers, of which there is not a shortage, is really concerning. We currently have a shortage of doctors. We have a shortage of nurses. We have a shortage of long-term care workers. We have a shortage of teachers. We have a shortage of education assistants. We have a shortage of early childhood educators. And what are we prioritizing at this moment in time? The mob police, of which we have no shortage. And he says here, we're taking action to get more boots on the ground. And it's like, what do you mean? This isn't a war. We don't need boots on the ground. Boots on the ground to fight who? To fight us. To fight the actual people of Ontario. It's like, why do we need boots on the ground? We're not Russia's invading army. We don't need to have boots on the ground. We need Like that, we need the supports that can stop this cycle of poverty and pushing people to the fringes of society, right? We need support for mental health. We need support for health. We need education. We need social workers. We need to rise the tides on the quality of life for all people. We don't need more police on the streets. That is not the solution. We need housing, right? We don't need people who are unhoused to face more scrutiny at the hands of police officers. And what I really hate about this, is that, of course, they are like tokenizing these Toronto officers. They put black and brown folks at the front lines of the police force when they're doing these photo ops. But we know what police represents. We know that police is a colonial institution. We know that a lot of people who join the police are in bed with white supremacists. You need not look further than the convoy that happened in Ottawa. And we know that police of all levels essentially helped the people who were calling for fascism in Canada. So here's saying also, our government is helping police services across the province recruit and train more officers to address crime and keep people safe, which is a way of saying we are removing what is essentially an insurance that we are at least getting some people who have a basic level of education, which is like 2 years of college. All you need is like a 2-year college certificate, and you could then go to police college. So I don't know. Let's take a look at this trash video.
Ontario is very grateful for all the women and men that serve as police.
Okay, this guy, what is going on with this guy? Look at this. This is, okay, of course, again, as I'm telling you, they're putting all the people of color front and center. Very tokenizing, right? How many cops are trans? That's a good question. Like, I feel like trans representation within the police is pretty much non-existent.
Ontario is very grateful for all the women and men that serve.
What is it? I can't get over what is going on with this guy crossing his arms. Like, all right, tough guy. Like, that, yeah, like, what? Who are you intimidating? The camera?
That serve as police officers.
Like, it really seems like he should be out in front of the club kicking out drunk people instead of being a cop.
Keeping our community.
Of course, I really hate, like, here, more people of color who are police. It's like, wow, there's an Asian woman who's a cadet for the Toronto police. And it's like, okay, traitor.
Safe. We announced that we'd be absorbing 100% of the tuition for new recruits going to the police college. It's extremely expensive.
God, what is this music too? Oh my goodness. This like stock PR music here.
Cost can get up to $15,000, and this is going
to $15,000 for a 3-month course that you can eventually make over $100,000. Are you kidding? That's nothing. That's nothing compared to other people's education.
It's going to help attract new recruits to join the police agencies across our great province.
And then you don't even make the money back when you get an actual education.
To serve the people of their community.
We need more people, as the Premier said, to keep our communities safe.
We do need more people, but we don't need cops. All right. We need more teachers. We need more healthcare workers. We need more people working in social housing to make sure that people are able to get affordable places to live.
So what we want to do is have more people graduate the Ontario Police College each year, because we know each year they will be needed to serve services all over Ontario.
Nah, they're not needed. They're overpaid security rent-a-cops, They're basically just like really expensive rentals.
More boots on the ground will allow us to attend.
What is this? I don't understand the boots on the ground. Like, we are boots on the ground to police us, the citizens of Ontario. That's what they're saying.
Into our core services, which is what our communities need, want, and frankly deserve. It'll allow us to attend.
This guy, I hate this photo op that they've done here.
Our communities and meet their needs.
There's an incentive again that we're doing to make sure that we have the proper number of police officers serving their community, keeping our streets safe.
God damn it. This honestly, what is this music? It feels like I'm watching a Nintendo Direct.
These are the men and women that are going to be serving us for many years to come.
Imagine being a person of color and shaking Doug Ford's hand. And I mean, you're already a cop. You're already a class traitor, you know? So I guess it's not surprising. I do genuinely feel that in the days to come, we will hear more about how Doug Ford is in bed with police officers. It's been part of his MO for a long time. All of his daughters are dating or married to police officers. The former chief of police, Mark Saunders, who's running for mayor in Toronto, used to work on Doug Ford's staff. There's a lot of conflicts of interest here, and it's really shouldn't be surprising to people that Doug Ford is basically on the, he's like a he's like a fat blue line. Sorry, not to body shame here, but Doug Ford is like a fat blue line, and he's like the only thing protecting society from falling into absolute chaos. Luckily, he's very thick, and he's able to get this many officers, boots on the ground, to, why stop at boots on the ground? Why not just complete the metaphor and say batons in the skulls of Ontarians? Because that's really what's going on here. I also want to just say that there is no crime wave. There is no crime wave happening, and there is no shortage of police. Every day we're here looking at the news, and we always hear about shortages of doctors, shortages of nurses, shortages of teachers, but we have never once heard that there's a shortage of police officers. And it's like what are you talking about? This is something that doesn't even need to be done. There's enough police, and there's enough people who want to be police.
The Ontario government is attempting to make it easier to become a police officer. They're removing tuition.
Easier? Jeez. You really just at the moment you graduate high school, you get a gun.
Fees and expanding the number of recruits in each class. But Premier Doug Ford is also scrapping a post-secondary education requirement for police recruits.
These measures will help attract new recruits, break down financial barriers that may have stopped people from becoming a police officer, and build a pipeline of police officers ready to serve and put.
Jeez, a pipeline of white supremacist fascists. As if we needed more.
That means I can lie here and relax while my strength comes back to me.
BRB becoming a cop. Thanks so much for subscribing for 10 months in a row, RJ Helms. Really appreciate that.
Push back against the growing tide of crime.
Here to discuss today's changes is Michael Kempa, an associate professor of criminology at the University of Ottawa. Professor Kempa, good to see you.
We interviewed 5 cops to see if this is good or not.
See you again.
Thank you, you too.
What do you make of this plan by Doug Ford? His plan here to recruit more police officers.
Well, it's pretty much a random move. I mean, really, my first question would be to the Premier, why are you contradicting your own legislation? Because it was his Police Act in 2019 that got the whole ball rolling, requiring post-secondary education for police officers to begin with.
Okay, so explain that to me.
So he's just going deeper and deeper in bed with the police forces of Ontario.
We have seen people recommend higher levels of education and a broader experience for police officers. This came up in the Mass Casualty Commission report in Nova Scotia. Why was it done, and why do you think he's getting rid of it?
Right, so in the wake of the Nova Scotia shooting, they basically determined that one of the things they need is to have police with more education. You don't say. And that's going to be something that is going to prevent police killings and abuse of power.
Well, the whole idea is to change policing culture by bringing in that higher level of education and training. Mm-hmm. The idea, and again, this is not...
change police culture by having people who have a very minimal level of education and not just a zero amount.
Sort of a professor's recommendation. The province of Ontario is moving in the direction of community safety and well-being, where the police are one key pillar, working with mental health, working with schools, working with all manner of agencies that make that contribution to networks of community safety.
I really hate this framing. I hate that police would have to be a pillar in our wellness and community safety. You know, I genuinely believe that they are not a pillar, but they have been doing this kind of structural rebrand. And instead of defunding the police and funding those things, they've tried to make sure that they're holding on to their money, because that's what this is really all about, is money from the government, from us, the taxpayers. And they're like, oh, we're actually going to do those things. We're gonna hire less police officers and hire those things that you need in terms of community safety, like those social workers or those people who are keeping track of social injustice or hate crimes in the community. And it's like, no, actually, I don't trust you with these services because you have a long history of racism and colonization. I want you defunded, and I want those other services funded separate from the police.
To do all of that, they need to get out of the culture of looking inward for their own solutions, being the police driving the whole process of community safety. So that's where that idea for post-secondary education really came.
Right? So yeah, here they're trying to get out of this idea that like policing is the way forward and into this idea that policing is just one pillar of community safety. And it's like, well, yeah, I get the feeling that if we just like demolished that one pillar, then we'd all be a lot safer.
Came into play. The Mass Casualty Commission, in a sense, is endorsing where Doug Ford went in 2019 with that requirement. And now we've gone in a completely different direction. And it is odd because we're still waiting for that piece of legislation to be proclaimed. We're still waiting on the regulations.
Right.
So that's a 3.5-year process.
Right. So this is legislation the Ontario Government's Community Safety and Policing Act passed in March 2019 that put in the post-secondary requirements. Never fully implemented. Now they're taking it out. The Mass Casualty Commission.
They all need a degree in Indigenous studies and a social worker degree in the very least. Yeah, you think they would need something, you know, like they would get like a 1-day training course on like how Indigenous people are like disproportionately represented in the prison system and the types of racism they face at the hands of police. They'll get like, a half-day training course and then like a check mark on their resume.
Commission wanted Public Safety Canada to work with provinces and territories to establish a 3-year degree-based model of police education for all police services in Canada. This is quite the departure from where.
No number of degrees in the right things is going to make them stop being cops. Yeah. The people who are attracted to being cops are people who are tickled by the idea of holding power over regular people. There's a reason why cops and cops unions are considered class traitors. The only reason they exist is to uphold the status quo and to police the rest of us at the behest of people who have money, right? Like they are just there to protect the interest of the upper class. They're not there for the working class. They're not real workers. You know, they have a union, but the only reason their union exists is to take more of our money as workers, as taxpayers. Also, good morning, Rabbit Ribbit.
Where things were headed.
Yes, I mean, I'm all in favor. It's a great idea to eliminate the tuition cost for people attending the Ontario Police College once they're hired. That's a great idea. But then we shouldn't eliminate the requirement for the post-secondary education. I understand the logic that if you make it basically easier to join the police, you're removing barriers. But rather than lower the bar, why not make the education more accessible? Perhaps create scholarships, particularly for hard-to-reach communities, to go through that training to join police services a little bit more prepared.
Right, because they're trying to open it up.
You know, I really hate this. This guy's like, why don't we have free education for marginalized communities so that they can become police officers? And it's like, well, why don't we just do this across the board? Why don't we just have better access to education no matter what you want to do with your life? You know, like, but we're not doing that. The only incentives here are for cops to become class traders.
Increase the numbers because they do have a capacity challenge in a lot of the police forces. But I wonder, what are the consequences of making it high school only and then you go into a 3-month course, essentially, is what it is.
This guy wanted to be a cop, but then accidentally went to grad school. Yeah, for real. That is genuinely the vibe I get. The thing is, the more education you get, the less likely you are to become a cop, because you begin to be more educated about how these systems of power exist, and your other opportunities are made available to you, where you don't have to like accidentally kill indigenous people because you're a racist ass cop. You know, it's like, hey, maybe it would be better if you worked for a nonprofit and you could help people in your community that way, instead of policing unhoused people when they have nowhere else to go. I think a lot of people with education are going to make that choice to not be a cop. And that's what they're really concerned about here.
What are the potential consequences of moving in that direction for policing?
Well, the idea of the post-secondary was that, and the Mass Casualty Commission made this point, it needs to be research-oriented education.
Right.
So in a sense, if you want to train police officers to be good problem solvers, to work in those networks of community safety, you teach them about how to evaluate statistics, to evaluate the quality of information on the internet and so forth. It basically makes them good investigators. So that's
I love, like, it's crazy that this even needs to be said. Like, it turns out having smart people in policing makes police smarter. It's like, yes.
the logic. You don't get that in a 12-week program where you're running modules around the necessary specific skills for law enforcement.
So do you...
And that is my major concern. Like, when I was someone who was struggling with their philosophy degree, I struggled because I'm a bad student, but I was also thinking like, oh crap, what am I going to do once I'm done this philosophy degree? One of the options available to you is to like be a police officer, because turns out it would be useful to have good critical thinking skills, right? It's like, hey, you could be a lawyer, you could be a police officer, you could do a lot of things with a philosophy degree. You could essentially do anything, because critical thinking, critical reading, and writing are really important, right? But some people were like, hey, you should be a cop. And I'm like, no chance in hell I'm ever going to be a cop, right? It's just like, struggling doesn't make me a bad student. It's true. But there were other reasons that made me a bad student. Mostly, not doing the work, and everything I learned, and kind of just like misunderstanding myself in a fundamental way, and how I learn and operate and communicate. Everything I learned ended up being like community based, and not like a police officer's in the community, just like being an organizer and an activist.
I mean, does this weaken policing? Because we've heard, I understand the response to the crime wave that the country has experienced, violent crime being up in the country, a string of police killings. You understand the need for greater safety. They want more police to deal with some of these challenges. But there have also been endless stories about culture issues and culture challenges inside police forces. And that is...
Yeah, they really don't give any fucks. They're just like going against all the evidence here of what needs to be done, even just to do reforms in policing, right? Even to do the bare minimum of reformation, something that, the defund the police movement largely has warned against, is that it's not enough to reform. We need to defund and transform society.
Some of what higher levels of education have been aimed at solving too. So what advice would you have for them on how to tackle that if they're going to go in this direction?
Well, the big thing would be, just because we're eliminating the minimal requirement, it's not necessary that every single municipality is going to immediately rush off to hire high school graduates as police officers. The province has acted before in policing where municipalities have said, we're not going in that direction, and police services have moved in their own standards. So there's nothing to stop municipalities and police services boards from carrying on hiring the most qualified candidates. It's just simply that they don't have to hire people who have post-secondary education.
This is really stupid. I feel like if it was any other field, let's say it was like nursing, right? It's like, imagine you could just become a nurse after a 3-month course out of high school. Would the hospitals hire those people over people who have a 4-year nursing degree? No, they wouldn't. But I have a feeling that when it comes to the idiots who are in charge of policing in this country, that they would genuinely hire those people out of high school. Because it's just like one of those things where like, it doesn't take much to be a police. The high school bully to police pipeline is officially complete now. In 3 months, you can go from being the biggest bully in your high school to being a police officer with a gun. Doug Ford proving once again that he's as corrupt as we all warned against before he was elected. If you are already a police officer, this is like a bad look. This is like bad PR for you. It's like, hey, you know that job that you're like just barely qualified for? Well, the new people that you're going to be working with will have even less qualifications, and people already hate you and think that you're dumb. And now we've essentially proven that you are dumb, because even a fresh-faced 18-year-old who just graduated high school can do your job because you're a fucking idiot. You know, like why not make sure you don't miss the next video by liking, commenting, subscribing, and ringing the bell? Thank you so much for watching. It's my homie 2 Taro. Peace.